Number 51 of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room as well as remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to take a few moments for the benefit of the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please do mute yourselves when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom is at the bottom of your screen, and you do have a choice of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. In accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of our meeting. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, June 20th, 2022, the committee resumes its study of the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women globally. It is now my great pleasure to welcome from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to have the floor just for a moment before we introduce the witnesses, if I could.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. And I am very excited that we are going ahead with this study. It's long overdue, but I do also recognize that this is the last day before we have a 2-week break. And so I did want to ask for a vote on the 2 motions that have been shared with my colleagues in both official languages, if I could. So if you'd like, I can read them into the record, but I would like to get that just out of the way so that we can focus on the important work of SRHR. I'll start. I'll read the first one. That the committee
Mr. Chair, I'm
Diane?
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I'm deeply committed to the studies that my colleague would like to raise, and frankly, I agree with them. But I cannot help but question the procedure of doing this at this point while we have witnesses before us. This is not committee business. So, I mean, I'm not really sure that this is in order at this time.
It is in order. I've been advised that she is very much in order because she does have the floor, and also she had tabled this previously, correct?
Also, I did want to just point out that this was something that Mr. Bergeron did before our meeting at the last meeting. Like, it is something that is normal practice for this committee. So if I could just complete we could do this quite quickly. I think most people are in agreement with this. So it is that the committee report the following to the House. The committee calls on the Government of Canada without delay to amend sections of the Criminal Code currently preventing Canadian humanitarian organizations from delivering aid in Afghanistan and similar contexts without fear of prosecution. Mr. Chair, this has been something that the government has been promising for some time. I would like to see this come forward. I know that we've brought this forward within the report for Pakistan, but I do think it is something that all members of this committee would like to see the government move on, and we will be giving them 2 weeks that they can take this under advisement.
Yes, Mr. Swain.
Mr. Chair, I just moved to have these move that we adjourn debate on these motions until the last 15 minutes of the meeting, just so we can go through the witnesses and we can discuss this in the last 15 minutes. I have no problem with Ms. McPherson's motions, but just would like to move that we adjourn it for the last 15 minutes in light of the witnesses that are lined up.
Mr. Chair, as Mr. Bergeron did in the last meeting, I think this is something we could vote on quite quickly. I would rather do this now.
So we will put it to a vote.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Sarai's motion.
So the vote is on Mr. Sarai's motion to adjourn debate. Madame Bendayan.
Oui.
Mr. Fredgiscados.
Yes.
Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi.
Yes.
Mr. Chong.
No.
Mr. Epp.
No.
Ms. Kramp-Nyman.
No.
Mr. Obak.
No.
Mr. Bergeron.
No.
Ms. McPherson.
No.
Nays 6, yeas 4.
This first motion that is before us. No? Should we put it to a vote?
So the vote is on the motion of Ms. McPherson.
Which one?
The first one, which is relates to
The one that I just read out.
amending sections of the criminal code to
Madame Benayan.
Oui.
Dr. Fry.
Yes.
Mr. Fredgiscados.
Yes.
Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi.
Yes.
Mr. Chong.
Yes.
Mr. Epp.
Yes.
Ms. Kramp-Nyman.
Yes.
Mr. Obak.
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron.
Oui.
Ms. McPherson.
Yes.
Nays 0, yeas 11.
motion unanimously carried. Now, you'd like to proceed with your second motion, Ms. McPherson?
That is correct. And that is that the committee hold 3 meetings to study the current situation in Iran, including examining the federal government's refusal for listing the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist entity, the connections between people or assets in Canada and the IRGC, and paths forward to support Iranian human rights activists, artists, journalists, and other political refugees. That the committee invite the Minister of Foreign Affairs to testify, as well as additional witnesses submitted by members of the committee, and that the committee report its findings back to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a comprehensive response to the report. Again, I'd like to put that to a vote. I think we can all agree that this is an important study that needs to be done, considering the situation in Iran and the deteriorating situation for political prisoners.
Okay, we go to a vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the vote is on the second motion of Ms. McPherson. Madame Bendayan.
Oui.
Dr. Fry.
Yes.
Mr. Fredgiscados.
Yes.
Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi.
Yes.
Mr. Chong.
Yes.
Mr. Epp.
Yes.
Ms. Kramp-Nyman.
Yes.
Mr. Obak.
Yes.
Monsieur Bergeron.
Oui.
Ms. McPherson.
Yes.
Nays 0. Yeas 11.
Motion
Mr. Chair.
unanimously carried. Thank you for that. Now we will resume our committee hearing. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, June 20th, 2022, the committee resumes its study of the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women globally. It is now my pleasure to welcome from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Mr. Joshua Taba, who is the Director General, Health and Nutrition, as well as Ms. Tanya Trevors, Director, Health and Rights of Women and Girls. Mr. Taba, you will be provided a maximum of 5 minutes for your remarks, after which we, of course, will proceed with questions from the members. I will signal you once you only have 30 seconds left. Would be grateful if you could wrap it up within a short order. The same rule applies when we go to the members for questions. If there's only 30 seconds remaining for that particular slot, I will put this up. So welcome to our committee, Mr. Taba. You have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members. We appreciate the opportunity and the invitation today to provide information on how Global Affairs Canada supports women's sexual and reproductive health and rights globally. Tel que mentionné par mon collègue, le soumis.
As my colleague, the ADM, Peter McDougall, said to the committee in December, Canada is committed to increasing its funding to an amount of $1.4 billion per year on average by 2023-24 and continuing until 2030 in order to support women's and girls' health and rights in the world. Of that total, $700 million will be for the promotion of sexual and reproductive rights in the world, women's health in the world, in particular, areas often neglected by other donors. For example, 1, family planning and contraception. 2, safe abortion services and post-abortion care. 3, complete information about sexuality. 4, promotion activities with regard to women's health and sexual and reproductive rights. And 5, prevention of and intervention following sexual and gender-based violence.
Health and rights is unprecedented in its scope and length for Global Affairs Canada, and is something Canadians should be particularly proud of because of how it builds on more than a decade of successful maternal and child health work, and because the need for global leadership on these issues remains acute. Extensive input from Canadian and international experts and partners in 2016 and 17 during the development of Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy, combined with scientific and programmatic evidence outlined in the 2018 Guttmacher-Lancet Commission, as well as other studies, reinforced how investments in comprehensive SRHR are critical for advancing the Sustainable Development Goals, for promoting gender equality, and for ensuring economic prosperity. This evidence informed the development of the health and SRHR action areas of the Feminist International Assistance Policy and the subsequent programming we have been undertaking since. Le Canada réalise de bons progrès dans le respect de
Canada is making good progress towards its current commitments. In 2020-21, Canada spent $489 million to support initiatives relating to health and sexual and reproductive rights, which allowed more than 4.5 million individuals to receive sexual and reproductive health services in 29 countries.
Questions and to share more about the work that Canada is undertaking in this space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now proceed with questions from the members, and the first person will be MP Kramp-Neiman.
Great. Good morning to both of you, and thank you for joining us here today. As a mom, I have 2 young teenagers, so this is certainly something that hits home for me. I'd like to speak specifically to our teenagers that are growing up in a much different context than any generations have before. For example, we have smaller families. They're definitely much more digitally connected, and they're less likely to use contraception and also less likely to be married before the age of 18. So a lot has changed over the generations. Conversations about menstrual hygiene and health, HIV, sexually transmitted infections, intimate partner violence, it's all very concerning, and I'm thankful that I have a very open relationship and conversation with my children, but a lot of people do not. What efforts or actions are needed to build on the progress and efforts that have been made over the last several years?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank the member for an excellent question. Questions that Tanya and I are both parents ourselves certainly ask as well as we raise our teenagers. I think I can probably offer the most insight speaking about the international context. And I think you're right that too often around the world, youth and adolescents in developing countries don't receive adequate information, both on their own rights and the right to bodily autonomy in particular, but also information about sexuality and reproductive both functions and services that they should have access to. That's one of the reasons why we are trying to take a comprehensive approach to sexual and reproductive health and rights. such that we are adding to our significant portfolio of maternal and child health programming with a specific focus on adolescents to ensure that they get access to current information, both through the formal curricula in the schools where they work, but also more broadly through social services being made available to them, such that they can use that information to properly exercise bodily autonomy. And whether that's by seeking out contraception or making decisions about their future, it is something that we consider fundamental, and we feel the comprehensive approach that we've taken for SRHR, which follows best practices as identified by the World Health Organization, is the best way for us to support that.
Thank you. Following up to that, I really believe that it is important for adolescents to have a place at the table and in the conversations. Learning firsthand the appropriateness and the effectiveness from our teenagers and meaningfully involving them in the process is fundamentally important. So what barriers do you see that are currently happening in the progression of sexual reproduction of health?
Thank you. I think there is a growing awareness in the international assistance community, and more particularly in the global health and SRHR communities, about the leadership role that we want to ensure that communities and the persons that we aim to serve themselves play in the work that we do, whether programming or policy, and that involves adolescents in particular, adolescent girls and adolescent boys. And so in some of the initiatives that we work with, we try and ensure not just a seat at the table, but really an active and direct participation by youth representatives. I have the great privilege of working with an organization called the Global Financing Facility, which is a World Bank mechanism that ensures effective primary health services and comprehensive SRHR in 32 countries. And we've worked to ensure not just a youth voice at the table, but an active role in the governance of the mechanism, such that the youth representative has an equal voice and vote to other donors or affected communities themselves. And so a youth representative will sit with me as a donor representative along with ministers of health and really be equipped to occupy that space. We also ensure that the youth delegates are provided with any additional support that they require before the meeting so that they're able to be prepared and conversant on the topics. Sometimes our counterpart ministers of health can get swept away a little bit with dialogue, and so it's important to level the playing field to make sure that everyone is able to engage meaningfully in a way that's consequential as well. That's just one example, but I think it shows that from the top in terms of global governance of an international health institution right down to the community level, we are making every effort to increase the local participation and direction that we receive for the efforts we make. Global Affairs only provides international assistance for global health and SRHR that supports local priorities, and increasingly we want to make sure that those local priorities are shaped not just by national governments, but also by subnational and community voices, including youth.
Excellent, thank you. Could you speak a little bit more specifically to the HIV infections and what could be done to prevent those among our adolescents?
Yeah, thank you. It's an excellent question. The only segment of the population where we are not seeing the reductions in HIV transmission that we expect are with adolescent girls in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a particularly vulnerable group, and obviously this is intimately tied to broader questions of bodily autonomy and gender equality. Our primary partner for work on HIV is the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. I have the great privilege to serve as a board member on that organization. And we are really ensuring that from a top-down perspective, that specific segment becomes a much greater focus for the Global Fund's HIV efforts. It's fantastic that the Global Fund is able to ensure that all countries in sub-Saharan Africa have access to the ART treatments that everyone requires to be able to manage the infection, but we're really going to scale up the attention for prevention with adolescent girls over this coming strategy cycle. I was recently in Ghana and I spent time with the Global Fund. I was very impressed working with nurses and doctors and community health workers about how they respond to people with HIV infections very well, getting those case levels right down to zero so that there isn't further transmission. But where there is an opportunity for more is on the prevention side. And it's directly related to bodily autonomy because an adolescent girl has to be able to choose who her partners are. She has to have effective systems to prevent and address the incidence of SGBV that she could be subject to. Without protection from bodily autonomy, it becomes very difficult to ensure that she is able to protect herself from HIV transmissions in the way that we would want. So, Mr. Chair, the honourable member is pointing to an area of very high priority for me personally and for the department over the coming years.
Thank you, Mr. Tabat. We next go to Dr. Fry. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. Wow. Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to thank the witnesses for coming to this first hour of meeting. I do have the fact that we're talking right now about the comprehensiveness of the whole sexual and reproductive health and rights spectrum. I wanted to suggest that there is, you've just touched on one, that as adolescents talk about sexual and reproductive health, they're not only talking about contraception, they're also talking about information with regard to sexually transmitted diseases. Now, we know that in some countries, young girls are married off to much older men, mainly because of poverty reasons, mainly because of cultural reasons. And many of these young girls do not necessarily have the autonomy or the say in whether or not they're protected from sexually transmitted diseases. Because we know that in some countries, the taboo of HIV, the taboo of any kind of sexually transmitted disease is something that girl may not have the opportunity to have autonomy, to have decision-making powers. What are you guys doing to help that situation change?
Mr. Chair, thank you to the honourable member for a great question. Maybe just to step back, since the development of the Feminist International Assistance Policy, we have scaled up our support not just for sexual reproductive health and rights, but also for gender equality programming, and we are now recognized by the OECD DAC as the largest bilateral donor for gender equality initiatives. And we're scaling up our SRHR such that we are one of the top 2 or 3 right now. And a cross-cutting issue for both is preventing childhood early and forced marriage, as the honourable member has suggested. Very rarely is there adequate consent. Very rarely is that a reflection of effective bodily autonomy. And very rarely is that an expression of equality that we would like to see in the countries that we serve. And so there are both global and local initiatives that Canada provides both financial and policy support. These issues are inextricably linked of autonomy, empowerment, and CEFM. And so you can expect to see Canada to continue to play a significant role on those issues.
I just wanted to follow up on something to do with this. I know about enforced marriage, and I know that we have legislation here with regard to female genital mutilation. That is part of comprehensive sexual health. What is going with that? Have we been successful? Is it successful in eliminating this particular practice? Are we having problems? What are the challenges?
I would say we have been successful at fostering a global dialogue around both child and early forced marriage and also female genital cutting and mutilation, and that we work with a number of like-minded countries to shine a light on where these harmful practices continue. They have not been eradicated yet, and we continue to work with stakeholders in countries to support both the policy and legislative change that the honourable member refers to, but also to help shift social and cultural norms at a local level. And again, we don't do this by coming in with our own norms and values, but rather we seek to partner with the organizations that themselves are advocating for greater respect and autonomy for young women in these countries. And whether that's through support for these youth-led or women-run organizations, supporting local organizations, while also advocating through our bilateral relations for changes in legislation, is something that has been important for us. Obviously, we have data about the spending that we have done on these issues, and it is substantial. But I think more than anything, it is working with that new generation in these countries where these practices continue to ensure that they are empowered such that they can demand that their rights be respected from the duty bearers in their countries.
Thank you. How much time do I have left, Chair?
1.5.
All right, a quick what? Somebody can actually, it's when somebody's got their microphone open on the floor that I am hearing myself shouting in my own ear and in everybody else's ear. So I'm sorry and I apologize. I just wanted to follow up on that issue because I know that we are all globally working very, very hard, UNFPA and a lot of countries to try and deal with these practices of female genital mutilation and, of course, early and forced marriage. But early marriage, we're talking about people who are married off at 14. But we all know that medically, a young woman who has a child while she is still, before the age of 19, runs a very high risk of complications of pregnancy. And so what are we doing about contraceptive advice with regard to postponing your first child so that women don't have to face some of these complications of eclampsia and of premature birth and of a fair amount of damage to the child and themselves if they have children very, very early? And I don't mean 14 and 15. I'm talking about relatively early, 17, 18. We know that there are still high risks associated.
Yes, thank you. And so perhaps as a framing statement, I would just say that we support the goal of ensuring that every pregnancy is wanted, that every birth is safe, and that every girl and every woman is treated with dignity and with respect. And so that informs our approach to SRHR more broadly. And as I mentioned, we take a comprehensive approach, thank you, Chair, where we provide partners with the support so that they can deliver integrated services. And so our family planning programming is largely focused on access to modern contraception. It includes activities to provide individuals with both information and then, of course, the methods to allow them to attain their desired number of children and determine the spacing of the pregnancies involved. Happy to go into further detail, but I believe I'm at time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We next go to MP Bergeron. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. And in the 2017-22 National Plan for Implementation of Security Council resolutions on women, peace and security, Canada had an objective in Afghanistan of supporting increased representation of women in the National Defense Forces and also in supporting women's rights organizations in the context of the Afghanistan Plan for Peace and Security. Given what's happened in 2021 and given the constraints imposed by the Canadian law, how can Canada ensure that it can implement the objectives set out in the 2017-22 plan, and how is there any follow-up in the field given the situation?
Alors, Monsieur le Président.
Chair, I would like to thank the Vice Chair for the Deputy Chair for the question, but I will answer in English. I'm sorry.
Remember that unfortunately I'm not in position to provide a substantive or detailed answer to that question. I think that we would be happy to come back to the committee in writing to ensure that the member has access to that information. And I think specifically what you're asking is, since the change last summer, how is Canada ensuring continued progress against the objectives of its women, peace and security strategic outcomes specific to Afghanistan? And so we understand the question and we will come back to you in writing.
Merci.
Thank you. With the national action, Canada wishes to ensure protection of women's rights in Syria, and as you know, the situation, the political situation, and the security situation in Syria is chaotic, especially with after the earthquake, for example, and. You know that there are still citizens, Canadian citizens, men and women, including children, who are still in camps in Syria. How can the government ensure the implementation of its plan of action for Syria, in particular with regard to refugee camps? Once again, Chair, I would like to ask the committee's patience. This is an excellent question, but since I don't really deal with this particular topic, I can't answer in any great detail. But once again, I will make the commitment to provide you this information with regard to the implementation of our objectives in Syria in writing.
45% des avortements pratiqués à l'échelle mondiale ne sont pas sécuritaires, ce qui mène à l'hospitalisation.
45% of abortions across the world are not safe, which means that thousands of women, 5 to 13% of maternal deaths are because of these unsafe abortions. What are the main factors that contribute to these unsafe abortions across the world, and how is Canada working to improve the situation of women that have to go through this kind of experience? These practices that have a serious effect or can have a serious effect on even fatal on their health. Excellent question again. And
that preventable maternal death is a driving force about our comprehensive approach to SRHR. Women are dying unnecessarily because they can't get access to basic essential health services. And the member has properly provided us with the level of severity of this incident, with 7 million women ending up in hospital requiring hospitalized care for unsafe abortions. We have estimates of somewhere above 40,000 women dying annually because of unsafe abortion, and the actual figure is likely much higher according to our partners. This is something that's certainly underreported. And just to be clear, the case fatality for these situations is much, much higher in sub-Saharan Africa than in other regions of the world. It's more than twice as high as what the case fatality is in Asia, and 3 or 4 times higher. So this is a problem that is particularly affecting women in sub-Saharan Africa. And the member asked what are the drivers of this, and they are primarily a lack of access to effective reproductive health services, including safe and legal abortion services and post-abortion care at a significant scale to meet their need. We are working with partners like IPAS and others to try and strengthen the capacity of national health systems to address these situations. I can note that this is something that ministers of health across sub-Saharan Africa, in particular in Western Africa, have underlined to me as among the highest priority areas that they are seeking reinforced support from. I mentioned the Global Financing Facility before. The Global Financing Facility provides on-budget support to ministries of health in sub-Saharan Africa to help them develop and implement comprehensive approaches to SRHR that would include improved services for women. And so that's an important part of what we support. The most vulnerable women, of course, are those that are marginalized from diverse communities, and in particular those outside of major urban settings where they don't have access to adequate reproductive health services. And so this has been an important area of focus for us and will continue to be as we try and increase our investment specifically for these areas of comprehensive SRHR that have traditionally been neglected by international donors. And so there are...
Thank you, Mr. Tabat. You're considerably over time, sir. My apologies. We next go to MP McPherson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And it's nice to see you here again, Mr. Tava. And I just wanted to take a moment to congratulate you on, or all of Global Affairs, on the funding that's been announced for public engagement for the provincial and regional councils for international cooperation. I was very happy to see that, and I know that you maybe aren't working on that right now, but that you've been very instrumental in that work. So thank you. Obviously, I'm very delighted that we are starting this study. It's long overdue. This is work that I've been engaged in for most of my career. I think it's vitally important that we are doing this study. And I want to start a little bit on some of the information I received from an order paper question I submitted some time ago that talked about the spending on SRHR. So as you will know, in 2019 at the Women Deliver conference in Vancouver, the government announced $700 million that would annually be spent on the neglected areas of SRHR. Now, from what I understand, we've been significantly underspent every single year. So in 2019 to 2020, we only spent $450 million. In 2020 to 2021, we only spent $498 million. So we've never gotten close to that $700 million. Why is that?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank the member first, perhaps for her recognition of some new programming from Global Affairs, and I'll make sure that we pass that on to our colleagues responsible for that program. In terms of SRHR, the commitment by the Prime Minister in 2019 was to scale up our support for SRHR to an average level of 700 by next fiscal year, 23-24, and then to maintain that spending out to 2030. At the time that the commitment was made, we were providing a much lower level of support than $700 million annually. And so every year we have been building in our programming to increase. We expect to hit that target of $700 million for comprehensive SRHR next year. And so we feel we are on track to deliver on the government's commitment. We are also on track to then maintain that level of spending out to 2030. Furthermore, I would say it isn't just about writing big checks to our largest international partners and doing the same thing. The commitment in 2019 really was about shifting to a comprehensive approach to SRHR. The investments that we're making to increase access to comprehensive sexuality education, to family planning services, and to safe abortion and post-abortion care are investments that we're proud of and we think are taking us in an important direction.
Thank you. So what is the number then? We don't have that in the order paper question. Do you know the number for the 2021-2022 fiscal year?
Yes, I do. So our formal financial reporting for 2021 is that we dispersed $489 million to SRHR. And again, that was a very significant increase above...
It was a decrease from the 2020 to 2021 year, though, wasn't it? And in fact, you were supposed to be at 700 each year. So will you be catching those numbers up? Is there a plan for Global Affairs to catch up to not just the 700 for the final year of this, but to actually make the money up that was promised? You know, the government did promise 700 each year. So to say that you need to scale up is completely understandable, but that would mean you would need to scale up quite a bit further than 700 because that was money that could be used for the sector, of course.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if our communication on this hasn't been clear enough, but again, I do think the website is quite specific in noting that the commitment to reach 700 million is in fiscal year 23-24, and that we are scaling up from 2019-20 to 2021, and there has been an annual increase in our SRHR spending, and we will hit that commitment to $700 million next year, as per the commitment made by the Prime Minister, and then we do expect to maintain that level of funding of $700 million from 23-24 out to 2030.
But you just told me it was a decrease from in 2021 to 2022. Is it actually a decrease over what was spent in 2020 to 2021?
And sorry if I misspoke, but the $489 million was for fiscal year 2020, 2021. I don't yet have a figure for 21-22. We only close our books in March this year, and so at that point I'll be able to provide you with a figure for 21-22 and then for 22-23 next year.
Thank you.
But just to say informally, I can say we are on track to hit that $700 million spending 23-24. Though again, there'll be a lag of about a year and a half before we can formally confirm that that is what we had spent.
It's interesting because the response that Global Affairs Canada gave me is different than the numbers that you're giving me, but I can look into that after. Of that 700 million or 489 million, can you give me a percentage of what amount of money is going to what size of organization? I guess. I mean, you talked a little bit about not wanting to write these massive checks to perhaps the big multilateral organizations. What percentage of that money is going to smaller, medium organizations, local Canadian-based CSOs?
Yeah, thank you. And so I can provide that level of detail for, again, fiscal year 2020, 2021, which I know seems like the ancient past right now, but unfortunately that's how long it takes us to close the books. For that year, roughly half of the investments that we made were through international organizations through our multilateral branch. They weren't all large, though. Some of them are very large. We have to provide a significant amount of funding to the Global Fund so that they can respond at scale to provide the reproductive and HIV services that we want. About 30% of that spending went to civil society organizations. I don't have that disaggregated between international or local civil society organizations and Canadians, so I can get back to you. And then about 5% was spent through partner governments directly. And then there's a variety of other kinds of organizations that fit in there. But essentially, very significant funding through the global health institutions, and that includes the Global Fund, Gavi for immunization, the World Health Organizations for both normative and health systems work, then a lot of the CSOs doing really important community-level work in terms of the delivery, but then also working with partner governments for some of that on-budget support when we have pooled funds. I'm getting a note from the chair that I'm almost at time.
Questioning. We go to MP Epp. We have 3 minutes for this round.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. Prior to, actually I should share as others have that I'm honored and blessed to have 4 daughters, one a nurse, an administrator, one a lawyer. And so I've had many good family room discussions on many subjects that I'm involved with. Prior to being elected, I also had the honor to serve with the Canadian Food Grains Bank, an organization that delivers aid internationally, also works through partner organizations, as the briefing notes show here as well, works toward SDG number 2 on zero hunger. I recall 40 years ago on our own farm, bagging corn, yellow corn, to support that organization. It was being shipped to Africa. The reason why I raised this is because later on we learned that yellow corn is animal food, white corn is human food. And so it was a learning of the organization to be responsive to the context in which they were working. And so it was, in fact, that organization led to a change in Canadian policy in 2008, and I won't go into those specifics. But it leads to my question. You're working with 400 partner organizations delivering almost 700 projects. You mentioned in your opening testimony that you're conscious and aware of our societal norms and going into obviously other contexts. What's the mechanism of interaction with your partner organizations so that is taken into account?
Thank you, Chair. Let me just share that I have a great deal of respect for the CFGB as well, and I think we all miss Jim Cornelius these days. What a great leader he was. We have an extensive field footprint in the countries that we work with and that we serve, and so all the initiatives that we work on brings together both our local capacity and capability in these countries, as well as a team of outstanding professionals here at headquarters, and then also in our multilateral missions in New York and Geneva. And so for an organization like the Global Fund, again, which is so large and works in almost every developing country, and we now have a commitment to provide $400 million a year, we work at multiple levels with an organization like that. So at a global level, I sit on the board of governors of the organization to help shape both policy and programs. But then, more importantly, we work with our field teams in each of the countries that the Global Fund serves to ensure that they have up-to-date information, not just on what the Global Fund is intending, but also on ways that they can be involved in the country coordination mechanisms to ensure that the requests for funding that are coming back up to the Global Fund are informed by the perspectives that we have to share at a local level. And that
Thank you. I'm going to cut you out. I want one more quick question.
Sure.
Just going back to the previous itineration of federal. Muskoka Initiative. Was a fuller report done on that? And because of time, could you share that evaluation of that report with the committee?
If you could respond in 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, I can. We did have a closing evaluation of the Muskoka investments that we made. It's on our website, and we'd be happy to share that report with the committee. It's a fantastic foundational document to learn more about these issues.
Thank you. We now go to MP Bendayan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Since my time is limited, perhaps I'll kind of ask all of my questions at once and leave you the remainder of the time to respond. You mentioned earlier in this meeting that Canada is assisting 4.5 million people in 29 different countries, if I heard you correctly. I would be interested in getting a list of those 29 countries, perhaps tabled with the committee after this meeting. And the reason is that, and I hear you on the situation in Africa and in other developing countries, but the truth of the matter is we've seen backsliding of women's reproductive rights around the world, including in many countries in the West. And of course, I am referring to the decision to overturn Roe versus Wade in the United States, but also some of the draconian laws restricting access to abortion in Poland, as well as attempts to restrict abortion rights in Italy. So I would like to hear you on what Canada can do in order to stem this trend, if you agree that that it is a concerning trend, and also what Canada's role, if any, is in ally countries such as Poland, given the state of their laws restricting access to abortion for women.
Great, thank you. We'd be very happy to share that list of countries, and I'll just note that we are now producing on an annual basis a report on our 10-year commitment that includes a very careful look at all the allocations from both the SRHR and global health pillars of the 10-year commitment, and also includes information on specific advocacy that we have carried out with other countries. It's something that I hope the committee will be interested in year over year, because I think that's where you'll see the progress we're really able to make with something like a 10-year time horizon.
And does that advocacy include with the United States?
Yeah, I'm not in a position to comment on specific items, but I think the Prime Minister and other ministers were outspoken the day after and the day of the decision for Roe versus Wade, and so the Prime Minister tweeted out his disappointment with the decision. I would characterize that as advocacy at the very highest levels, and you are right to point to backsliding by a number of countries. I do want to show, though, that there is light in the sense that many countries have actually moved to liberalize their laws and provide a more supportive and evidence-driven approach. That includes Benin, Argentina, Colombia, the DRC, Mexico, have all been working to increase the scope of their abortion laws. We work with countries like those and also other like-minded countries in both multilateral fora and bilaterally to ensure that countries understand Canada's positions and the evidence on which we base them. Thank you.
And
thank you. I'm afraid you're out of time, Ms. Bendayan. We next go to Mr. Bergeron. You have a minute and a half, Mr. Bergeron.
Very quickly, I'm going to let you carry on with your answer from earlier. That was very interesting. I'd like to ask a question saying, with regard to resources for abortion and post-abortion care, and would it not also be important to invest in awareness raising and access to contraception in order to avoid situations like abortion? Thank you.
Merci. Alors, on est complètement d'accord.
Thank you very much. We completely agree, and our approach is a comprehensive one.
Clear. It starts with comprehensive sexuality education so that adolescents have access to clear and evidence-based information about the services they can access. Then, of course, we want to provide robust family planning and access to modern contraception so that the pregnancies that do occur are intended and wanted. And then in the event that that's not the case, safe abortion support and post-abortion support. And then there also is a need to continue with the advocacy work and supporting that at country level so that those services are provided in a way that makes sense for the adolescents and other groups that they aim to serve. And that's why it is important that Canada's taken a comprehensive approach. And so in most of the initiatives that we work on, you'll see a combination of these different elements intermingled, all part of an essential universal health coverage system that aims to provide primary health care for communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And for our final minute and a half, we go to MP McPherson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you again to our witnesses today. This has been very interesting testimony. Mr. Taba, I know or I believe that Canada is going to be presenting a voluntary national review at the high-level political forum on the SDGs this summer. Is that correct?
My understanding.
And of course, knowing that SDG 5 is all about gender equality and fits in very much with the goals of the government, how will you be ensuring that is being reported at the high-level forum?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The report, I believe, will primarily concern itself with Canada's domestic implementation, but there will be an opportunity to flag where there has also been international engagement on these issues. So it might not be the main story, but we do hope it will be there, and I've seen some of the draft work as we think about that report. And then again, we're
Wonderful.
always happy to follow up with more detail.
Thank you very much. And speaking of following up with more detail, it would be wonderful if you could, because as I mentioned, the numbers that I received during my order paper question request are different than the numbers that you've brought to the committee. So if you could provide us with those numbers, including the numbers for 2021 to 2022 when those are available, that would be great. Thank you. Mr. Chair, that's all my questions for today.
Thank you. That's understood. We'll take note. The annual report that I made reference to before, I think, should lay out relatively clearly the numbers for 2021, and we think the next iteration of that report will be ready in the fall. But sometime between March and the fall, we'd be happy to come back and provide clarity on what the 2022 numbers show us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That concludes the questions. At this point, allow me to thank Mr. Taba and Ms. Trevors for their expert testimony. I have every confidence that this will be very, very useful and helpful for the purposes of concluding our study. Thank you very much. Now, members, we have approximately 4 or 5 minutes, so I will suspend briefly. All those members who are virtual, we will be remaining on the same length. As you know, we will be proceeding with the second panel, but before we turn to the witness, I was wondering if all the members would agree to set aside the last 20 minutes of this hour to just discuss the details of the trip, which will be happening in the next couple of weeks. Of course, that segment would be in camera. Is that okay with everyone?
Mr. Chair,
one question, Chair.
Yes.
Is this only for the people who are on the trip or for the whole committee?
Well, since it is in camera, if anyone would like to leave and has other things that they would like to tend to, that would be perfectly fine. But it is in camera, yes.
Mr. Chair, I don't know, to the extent that you're requesting unanimous consent, I am withholding it. It is now 10 past 12, and you are seeking 20 minutes out of this panel, and that would leave us very, very little time in order to ask our
I would also
questions.
be withholding it.
Okay. My apologies to the members who requested this. So now pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, June 20th, 2022, the committee resumes its study of the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women globally. It is now my great pleasure to welcome before this committee a representative from Action Canada for Sexual Health and Rights, and that is Ms. Kelly Bowden. We are very, very grateful that you took the time to be with us here today. You will be provided 5 minutes for your opening remarks, after which we will proceed with questions from the members. And again, just as with the previous speaker, when you have 30 seconds remaining, I will just put this sign up. If you could just kindly wrap things up as expeditiously as possible. So that having been said, Ms. Bowden, the floor is now yours, and you do have 5 minutes.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Action Canada for Sexual Health and Rights is a national organization committed to advancing and upholding sexual and reproductive health and rights in Canada and globally. Through our frontline programming in Canada, managing a toll-free sexual health information line for Canadians, and through our work with partners around the world advocating for the advancement of SRHR, our analysis is grounded in the experience of the most vulnerable people who are seeking access and facing barriers when it comes to SRH services. Investing in and advocating for the promotion of sexual and reproductive health and rights, and specifically the underfunded and neglected areas of access to safe abortion services, contraception, comprehensive sexual health education, and advocacy for sexual health, plays a fundamental role in advancing global development and human rights. Support for SRHR and the neglected areas specifically saves lives, reduces overall healthcare systems costs, advances gender equality, and promotes economic participation. Every year, about half of pregnancies in low and middle income countries are unintended. About 218 million women have an unmet need for contraception, and there are currently an estimated 35 million unsafe abortions each year, with almost 4 million of these among girls aged 15 to 19 years old. The consequences of unsafe abortion are dire, resulting in mortality, morbidity, and lasting health problems. Almost every abortion death and disability could be prevented through a combination of sexuality education, effective contraception, provision of safe abortion care, and timely care for complications. Providing safe abortion care also reduces healthcare cost burdens from the fallout of unsafe procedures. World Health Organization estimates from 2006 show that complications of unsafe abortions cost health systems in developing countries $553 million per year for post-abortion treatments. When young women have unintended pregnancies, it makes them more likely to stop their education and less likely to participate economically later in life. Comprehensive sexuality education plays an important role in providing information that allows young people to understand their bodies and their rights and to make the decisions that are best for them. I understand that this committee was just looking at the situation in Turkey and Syria, and in humanitarian situations like this, the need for these services is exponentially higher. Unless SRHR is fully integrated into health systems as a foundational aspect of healthcare, it is easily deprioritized when the system comes under stress or strain. We see this in fragile states and humanitarian settings, and we saw this around the world throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Maternal mortality and gender-based violence increased, and rollbacks to contraception and other SRH services occurred. When we think about the experience of the pandemic, the importance of investing in advocacy for SRHR is also clear. It was women's rights organizations in this time that raised the alarm on service disruptions, helping to ensure that provision returned. It was local youth organizations who created ways to ensure that important sexual health information continued to be disseminated through new and virtual means. Investing in advocacy plays a critical role to both open up civic space and navigate appropriately within constraints to make sure that the delivery of programming for SRHR is both possible and effective. Canada's work on the neglected areas is critical because there are very few donors globally working in this space. There's thus a tremendous need for leadership in terms of service provision and global advocacy. Focusing Canada's investments in the 4 neglected areas can concentrate financial and political efforts in a way that maximizes impact. Canada's 10-year commitment to women and children's health can show Canada is stepping up where the world remains falling short by emphasizing the fundamental importance of a rights-based approach to sexual health and investing where the need is greatest. Canada's investment in SRHR is unique precisely because of this focus. Yet, in the last reported spending from 20 to 21, Canada has only $104 million of its SRHR spending invested in the neglected areas. Canada needs to aggressively scale up spending here if we're going to garner the political effort that is needed from partners around the world to make progress and transform the lives of millions of women and girls. Broadly, I would like to leave the committee with 4 key recommendations. That Canada scale up spending in the neglected areas of SRHR to ensure that we meet the ambition of delivering $500 million per year to the neglected areas by the end of 2023. That as a country, we double down on our engagement with the G7 and with other allies around the world to catalyze further global investment and support for the neglected areas of SRHR. That we continue the important work of investing in grassroots women's organizations and taking a localized approach to implementing SRHR programming. And lastly, that we ensure that sexual and reproductive rights are not only relegated to a conversation about development assistance, but also integrated into a more fulsome approach through a feminist foreign policy. I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bowden. We now go to the first person, which is, as I understand it, Mr. Chong. Mr. Chong, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Bowden, for coming to our committee. My first question is about something you referenced toward the end of your opening remarks. Where does Canada rank amongst donor governments in relation to funding for global health writ large and for sexual and reproductive health and rights specifically?
Thank you. I don't have the statistics in differentiating between Canada's investment in health as compared to other OECD countries. I think one thing that I will say is that a step that Canada has taken with this new commitment is to introduce tracking codes where we can see what our investment is as a country in these neglected areas of safe abortion access, contraception access, CSE, and advocacy. This is a first among OECD DAC countries, and in fact is an important step in being able to push other countries to trace and understand where that financing is going. Overall, Canada is one of the top donors and the top 10 investments in multilaterals like the UNFPA, which is the global multilateral leader on investing in SRHR. So while I don't have the numbers on health specifically, I think we're in a good position as a country to be able to push others to be clear on how they are and how we continue to invest in these areas.
Well, thank you for that answer. What percentage of Canada's overall official development assistance is devoted to women's and children's and adolescents' health? Do you have a sense of that? What percentage overall is devoted to what percentage of women's and children's and adolescents' health, what percentage does that make up of the overall ODA envelope? And then the second part to that question is what percentage does sexual and reproductive health and rights make up of as a percentage of the overall ODA envelope? Just roughly. I don't need an exact figure. I want to get a sense of that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't wager to do the math myself at the moment, but I mean, we have the commitment of $1.4 billion a year to global women and children's health from the government, of which half of that, so $700 million per year, should be dedicated to SRHR funding. That's the scale-up goal that is to be met by the end of 2023, and it would be your colleagues from the department who would be best placed to give numbers around the breakdown in relation to other financing that Canada has.
The overall envelope's roughly headed towards $7 billion. So that gives us a sense. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
How does the other question I have concerns the UN's health goal SDG 3. The goal that was set was to reduce global maternal mortality to less than 70 maternal deaths per 100,000. It's presently at roughly 220 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births. Can you tell us where that was, a decade ago, 2 decades ago? How much progress has been made on that goal in the last decade or two, and how much progress is currently being made on reducing those maternal deaths?
I don't have specific numbers in front of me, though I'd be happy to follow up and provide those. But what I can say confidently is that we have seen gains in the reduction of maternal mortality over that time. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic created a number of setbacks around issues of maternal mortality, gender-based violence, access to a wide range of SRHR services. So we're currently in a time period where there is losses to be regained on that front. But overall, there has certainly been progress made, and I'm happy to follow up with the statistics around it.
Okay. I was just talking to our analyst during the suspension, and she mentioned to me that in Canada we have roughly 8 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births, compared to 218 on an average globally, which means in some countries it's going to be a lot higher than that. And so obviously there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area, to meet the SDG 3 goals that have been set. The other question I had concerns SDG as well. One of the key goals of SDG when it was first agreed to several years ago was to better collect data on what exactly is going on. At the conclusion of the MDG initiative, the progress report highlighted that only 51% of countries maintained some data on maternal causes of death. Can you tell us what progress has been made globally in terms of data collection so that we can make informed decisions about where to allocate resources for the SRHR goals?
Yeah, I mean, there's two elements to this, right? Because there is progress at the national country level around health systems, data collection, and then there is increase or analysis of research being done by multilateral institutions, research initiatives to try and document changes in this progress. So I can't comment on the progress of individual countries and their health systems data collection. I will say that this is why continued investment in institutions like the UNFPA, who are continuing to collect and monitor these types of health indicators, is important investments for Canada to make.
I'm afraid you're out of time.
Just a short follow-up question on this?
You're considerably over.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you. So we now go to Dr. Fry. Dr. Fry, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Welcome, Ms. Bowden. I think what is distressing about the statistical data with regard to the whole aspect of sexual and reproductive health, the comprehensive nature of it, is that back in 1995, and I am long enough in the tooth to have been at the Beijing conference, when it was Canada who brought forward the fact that the unsafe abortions around the world represents a public health emergency. I am now hearing, and we now know, that we have 25 million women around the world who do not have access to safe abortions. Now, we also know that it's not simply having access to safe abortions. When you have unsafe abortions, a woman may not be able to have children after that because she gets the morbidity, her reproductive organs are all, infected, etc. So the point is, what do you see as the barriers to initiating sexual and reproductive health and rights around the world? Now, we could talk about the developing world, but what do you see as the barriers? A second question, and then I'm going to let you answer them, is that what is the difference between non-conflict areas, non-conflict countries, and conflict countries where we see rape now being a strategy, a tactic of war? And what are the barriers in both instances to achieving the full range of sexual and reproductive health and rights? Thank you very much, Ms. Bowden.
Thank you. I will firstly speak to the access to barriers to abortion access in particular. So I think I mentioned this, that fundamentally one of the things that is a challenge is that SRHR services are not being integrated as a foundational part of healthcare in countries around the world. So if you think about somebody who is looking to access a doctor to get support on any range of medical services, that point of service won't necessarily be one where they can access abortion or other sexual health services. So this is a big element of being able to ensure the provision of these services is to see them integrated fully into universal healthcare. So this is not only abortion, this is also access to contraception. So I think that's a big piece on the abortion access in particular. And I think that Canada's investments in advocacy for SRHR can play a very critical role in this. So, for example, I met with an organization called Resurge in Mexico earlier this year, which is a women's rights organization that is supporting community-led initiatives to bring people from rural communities into Mexico City where they can access dispensing locations for medication abortion. So you can see community initiatives like this that are helping to fill the gaps in the existing healthcare systems in these countries. Those kinds of initiatives can be scaled up, and by working with partners, they can also advocate towards their governments to understand these are the stop gaps that we're putting in place to address the lack of access that is apparent in our healthcare system. So that's on the first point around abortion access. On the differential challenges in fragile and conflict-affected settings, I think it is that there is just fundamentally kind of an erasure of provision of services that happens there. And when we prioritize what a humanitarian response looks like, it is often blind to the inclusion of SRH services in the face of that. We look at water, we look at sanitation, we look at infrastructure, but fundamentally understanding that people don't only need access to food in those times, but they also need access to health care is an important part of being able to address those settings in particular.
Thank you. I just wanted to, because we have heard in this committee here when we looked at Ukraine and the illegal war there, we've heard that from various people that many Ukrainian women were raped by Russian soldiers, and then many of them are going to countries where neighboring countries as refugees where they do not have access to abortion services. So that is a real concern in terms of conflict. One of the reasons I brought forward this motion was because I am very concerned that we are not seeing a lot of access to the full range of sexual and reproductive health globally. You are absolutely right when you say this should be part of an integrated health service. But we know that in many countries where it's not part of an integrated health service is because of lack of a health infrastructure in many of these countries, lack of clinics, lack of doctors, lack of nurses, lack of midwives, lack of all sorts of information. And so my question is, what recommendation would you make for us to be able to ensure that women have access to those rights that they need, and especially in conflict areas like in Ukraine? What can we do to help women have access to abortion after they've been raped? Thank you.
Thank you. I think to your point, this goes back to why it's important to have not only an integrated and comprehensive approach to healthcare systems, so integrating this into building up those programs through our development assistance, but also standalone programming to help ensure access to these services in times of great need. So in situations like the Ukraine and other humanitarian situations, ensuring that we are providing direct financing to organizations and initiatives that are delivering access to safe abortion care in those settings, that are providing comprehensive contraceptive supplies and distributing those. Those are the types of initiatives that Canada can finance to intervene immediately in those cases and ensure that those supports are in place.
How much time do I have, Chair?
You are just literally out of time, Dr. Fry.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks
On
very
the dot.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we now go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Chair. And on your internet site, we see that you have asked the government to increase access to contraception and other, and providing funds and assisting the UNFPA. And is that did that appeal? Was there an answer by concrete gestures from the government of Canada? And do you have the impression that access to contraception has improved across the world? And has Canada, as you asked, increased its contribution to UNFPA? And what other international organizations should be better funded by Canada to achieve these kinds of goals?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, so as of 2020-2021, we know that Canada has made significant investments in UNFPA programming. We've made contributions to UNFPA core funding, and we have also made investments in the UNFPA supplies mechanism, which is the multilateral institution's specific contraception provision services. So the last investment in UNFPA supplies in particular, we saw an increased one-time $20 million commitment over a period of 4 years. So it's a slight increase from the sort of annual commitment we had been making to the supplies initiative in particular. If you look sort of historically at the trajectory of Canada's funding to UNFPA, we've had a consistent core investment of between kind of 15 and 17 million, and we've seen a significant growth in programming investment. And UNFPA also does a significant amount of programming in fragile and humanitarian settings, so I think there is a big portion of the programming that is addressing that direct need in fragile states. I think where we continue to see a less movement around investment in the neglected areas is in relation to abortion and comprehensive sexual health education specifically. So of that 104 million that I was speaking of that is in the neglected areas right now, about 40 of that is in contraception services, another good chunk in advocacy towards SRHR, and a very minor amount in abortion and CSE.
Je crois comprendre de votre réponse.
If I understand correctly, with regard to abortion, there has been some backsliding or a slowdown in Canadian assistance. And how can you explain this backsliding?
I don't know that we can say, we can't, only in this year, 2021, have we been able to concretely see the number of investments that Canada has made in abortion services. So we can't say that there has been sort of an increase or a decrease in our financing in particular. I think around the world, we have seen a reduction in spending around SRHR programming writ large. So, for example, reductions in the UK's ODA spending, they cut a significant amount of SRHR programming, a big portion of which was to contraceptives over the past year. And we've seen reductions from other donors. So while this was already a small field of investment, there is a growing need and a decreasing amount of investments from other donors, which is why Canada's leadership in this space is so critical right now.
J'aimerais revenir sur une...
I'd like to come back to a question that I asked earlier. Since your appeal in 2019 to increase funding for contraception across the world, do you have the impression that this funding, or rather, do you think that access to contraception in the world has improved, or is there still a backsliding?
I think we would say that overall we have seen growing access to contraception. Canada has a number of partnerships with things like the Ouagadougou Partnership, which is a connection between a number of West African countries who are investing in how they can ensure the provision of contraceptive services there. There's things like the Family Planning 2020 and now Family Planning 2030 platform, which is another forum where countries are working together to ensure kind of coordinated scale up of both supply provision and demand generation for contraceptives in countries. And so broadly, I would say that yes, we have seen an increased provision of these services. And I think the piece that continues to need further attention is in the demand side. So ensuring that people have an understanding of what these supplies are, how access can be met.
Merci.
Thank you. On your internet site, we see that one of the objectives of your organization is to engage with the internet system and show where Canada is not meeting its human rights obligations. And with regard to that objective that you have on your website, in the area of women's reproductive health, what are the gaps in Canada's action with regard to women's sexual and health rights?
Yeah, so I think that we, through both the financial commitment that Canada has made in our international development assistance, but also in the way that we are showing up at international forums like the Human Rights Council, like the Commission on the Status of Women, like the Commission on Population and Development, Canada has been largely clear that we are standing in support of these rights. So I think it is about doubling down on that advocacy to continue that that's clear and that we can push other countries to do the same.
Thank you.
We next go to MP McPherson. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Delightful to have you here with us today, Ms. Bowden. Thank you so much for being here. It's nice to see you again. I wish I could be there in person. You know, of course, your testimony is not new to many of us. However, I can't I can't help but be shocked by these numbers. I mean, we all know them, but they are shocking nonetheless, that there are 219 million women that have unmet needs with regards to reproductive rights and health. The loss of life that is happening because of unsafe abortions. I think your testimony makes it very, very clear that limiting women's access to healthcare does not stop abortions from happening. It simply stops safe abortions from happening. And of course, the number that you gave us of $553 million per year because of unsafe abortions, that the cost to our healthcare system is another indication of how we are failing women around the world, I think. I wanted to give you some time. I know that you are such an expert in this field, and I just wanted to give you some time to expand on your recommendations on how or where Canada could specifically scale up funding for SRHR in neglected areas.
Yes, thank you. As I mentioned, there is the neglected areas of abortion, contraception access, CSE, and advocacy for SRHR, and there is the neglected among the neglected of investment in abortion and comprehensive sexual health education. I think it's under $2 million in the 2020-21 year that Canada has invested in access to safe abortion services. So when you look at the scale of the need, the financial implication of not providing these services, while we're naming this as a part of the comprehensive package of care, we are not putting the money in this area just yet. And so really aggressively scaling up in all four of those areas, but in particular the ones that remain underfunded by this government and by governments around the world, I think is a key step for Canada to be taking if we are going to use this 10-year commitment as a way to catalyze global investment and backing for the advancement of these rights. So I would say firstly that there's two of those four that require further attention. I think also global advocacy on behalf of the country is an important role here. So we cannot go this challenge alone. The amount of money that Canada is putting into this work is significant. Its long-term nature is significant. But what is unique about it is the potential for us to demonstrate investment in these neglected areas and catalyze other countries to do the same. And we need to be organizing with other allies, with other donors, making clear the impact of these investments and making clear that there is a rationale and a need for them to further invest themselves. There is a lot of good work being done by Canada already, but there are things like the She Decides partnership globally on abortion, where I think we could really lean further in to working with those allied countries to make investment in this area grow.
Thank you very much. And you speak about the need for Canada to be a leader in advocacy work. I'm conscious that I will be in Sweden, later on in just a few days, in fact, and that they have recently announced that they will no longer have a feminist international assistance policy. Of course, you spoke about Canada not yet having a feminist foreign policy. My colleagues have spoken about the backsliding in the U.S. The UK, you mentioned that the reductions that are happening there. Are you concerned that Canada is going to take some of the lessons from these allies, or do you feel that you're how do you feel about Canada's perspective now? Like, I'm concerned about the direction that some of our allies are going in, so I'm wondering if you could provide your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think has been mentioned, we've seen backsliding on these rights in many different settings and in many different places of the world. I think Canada has a huge platform to stand on with the investment that we've made, and there is an opportunity that needs to be leveraged there in order to take global leadership and to work with others to continue to ensure that we make progress on these rights. I want to be clear that I feel it's really important to expand that beyond development assistance and development minister conversations. There's a role for us to be playing in World Health Organization conversations, in international affairs. It was last year at the Assembly of Ministers for Religious Freedoms that took place in the UK, where we had this situation where introduction on SRHR language was there and then disappeared in further versions of the negotiating documents. And so it is across many different forums that we see the risk of backsliding on a consensus that these are rights that require investment and progress. And so I think there is an opportunity for us, and I think it spans far beyond the development arena, which is why looking at how this integrates into a more fulsome foreign policy approach is required.
And you spoke about the You Decide, She Decides campaign. So if you would send us some information on that, I think that would be great for the analysts to have some of that. And my very last question on this round is just, we look at
you have
ODA.
12 seconds remaining.
I will save that for my next round then. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you ever so much, MP McPherson. So for the second round of questioning, we go to Mr. Chong. Mr. Chong, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to follow up on what I wanted to ask earlier in my first intervention. The Sustainable Development Goals, as you know, Ms. Bowden, are universal in nature as opposed to the Millennium Development Goals, which only apply to developing countries. The SDG apply to both developed and developing countries. And, as I mentioned, as you know, one of the key goals of the SDG is to ensure that the availability of robust data. And, at the time of the MDG's final report, they noted that only 51% of countries had data on, maintained data on maternal causes of death. News reports last fall highlighted something I think is of concern as the SDG applied to Canada. According to reports at the time, the WHO reported a higher maternal mortality ratio for Canada in 2017 than Statistics Canada did by a significant amount. In fact, reports indicated that Canada's data is so incomplete that the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and others estimate that Canada's maternal mortality rate could be as much as 60% higher than what is being reported on by Statistics Canada. So if those estimates by the WHO are correct, while our mortality rate for maternal mortality rate is still low by global standards, those higher numbers would put us in the top, in the bottom tier, I should say, of countries in the OECD. And so can you tell us what gaps there are in data collection in Canada?
Yeah, certainly. One of the things that we have long called for, and I understand that we will likely see the introduction of soon in Canada, is a national sexual health survey. So providing kind of broad census information around some of these points in particular. That it is difficult across the federal system to compile data from a clinical level up to a provincial level into a national standard. So I think the introduction of a survey like this is something that could help close those gaps.
But why is that? Because we're not the only federation in the OECD. I mean, there are plenty of other federations that collect, data that is much more cogent than our federation. So, why are there gaps in our data collection?
I think that would be a question for Statistics Canada.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that answer. I don't really have any further questions. Perhaps my colleague, Ms. Newman-Cramp, does. I just wanted to follow up on that one issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Certainly. I'll follow up. Looking at your website, there was certain segments where it suggests it starts with youth taking action and advocating. And part of the particular op-ed that you had written, I understand, you spoke about the alarming increase in rates of chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis amongst the ages of young girls between the ages of 15 and 19. Now, that's speaking here nationally in Canada. Comparing that to other underdeveloped countries, where are we at?
Of course, again, with our healthcare system provision, those numbers are lower in Canada than they are in many countries around the world. But broadly, the same populations remain at risk. And so, again, young people who lack access to comprehensive sexuality education that informs them about the risks related to sexually transmitted diseases are less well prepared to be able to navigate preventing getting these diseases. And so while Canada, has numbers that are higher due to our overall healthcare system's investments, it is the same populations, I would say, in countries around the world who remain at greatest risk. And so in Canada, and maybe this actually speaks back to the further point about data in terms of the maternal mortality rates, we see populations who are lower income, less resourced and able to navigate healthcare systems, who are the ones who are consistently lacking access to services to prevent their ability to address things like STBBIs.
Thank you so much. And one last question.
We're out of time.
Thank you.
Nice try. We next go to MP Bendayan. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for being here. We're all looking at your website, clearly. I wanted just to confirm that on your website it says Action Canada is the Planned Parenthood of Federation of Canada, Canadians for Choice, the Canadian Federation for Sexual Health, and Action Canada for Population and Development. So you are all of those things.
Yes, we are a merger of those organizations that took place in 2014.
Well, thank you for all the work that you do in that context. I was also reading one of your posts on the website, and something in particular caught my eye. I will read you the extract, and I quote from Action Canada's website: "An increasingly well-funded anti-abortion movement in the United States and in Canada is chipping away at our rights, culminating in the horrific legal challenge that is now threatening to overturn Roe versus Wade. It's not a far stretch to imagine something similar happening in Canada too. Earlier this year, 82 MPs voted to restrict abortion rights. 82 MPs equals 24% of Parliament, exclamation point." End of quote. I wonder if you could expand on that statement and perhaps what leads you to be fearful that here in Canada we might see similar backsliding of our abortion and sexual and reproductive health rights.
Yeah, thank you. So organizations like the Association for Women in Development, through their Rights at Risk report that they produce annually, as well as the European Parliamentary Forum for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, have done an excellent job at tracking financial investments that are going into organizations that are doing active either legal work or public advocacy to undermine access to these rights. And so there is interesting data there, which I'm happy to share, which shows the sort of increase in those financial flows, which leads us to concern that there is a growing kind of organized movement in opposition to these rights. You've also all probably heard of the Geneva Consensus and the conversation that exists there among a number of states in opposition to the SRHR. And so I think our interest is ensuring that democratically aligned states and organizations which understand that these are not only provision of healthcare services but fundamental human rights are clear and as united in our advocacy to ensure the protection of these rights and services.
Thank you for offering to share those figures with us. Could you please table them with our committee? As well, given what you're seeing happening in Italy with an increase in a movement to restrict abortion rights and what has already passed in Poland, are you concerned for any other countries following this trend?
I wouldn't name any countries in particular, and I think it is also to, at the same time as recognizing the risk of backsliding, as was noted by previous witnesses, we've also seen a significant amount of progress in legalizing access to abortion and withdrawing restrictions that exist. So I think it is always a push and pull of the progress versus the risks, but I wouldn't say that there's any country in particular that we're following at this point.
Thank you very much for the work that you do here in Canada. And if there is anything, perhaps just in closing, is there anything that you feel the Canadian government can do in order to advocate more strongly on this issue?
Yeah, I think it is about continuing to be present in those international spaces. I think, actually the high-level political forum on the SDGs that was mentioned earlier is also an excellent opportunity for Canada to demonstrate where we are doing well and can do better on this at home as a kind of indication of what good progress looks like. Canada has very strong legal protections for abortion. Recognizing abortion as healthcare is, in fact, one of the best ways to ensure and protect that right. And so using that as a way to
Are
kind
you
of
concerned
share.
about any legislation that has been tabled or private members' bills that have been tabled?
Yes, our opinion has always been that we do not need further legislation to protect those rights here in Canada, and that introducing legislation around abortion has a high risk to, in fact, closing access as opposed to increasing it.
Mr. Chair, do I have any time remaining?
No, you do not, I'm afraid. We now go to Mr. Bergeron. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you again, Ms. Bowden, for being here with us today. And the representatives of Global Affairs have said that over the last 10 years, Canada has been recognized as a world leader in regard to health care for women, children, and adolescents. And I would just like to ask you, what is your opinion on this statement, which might seem very positive? And do you agree that Canada is a world leader with regard to women's and girls' rights? And if yes, why? And how? And if yes, and if not, what can they do more?
Yeah. I think that, yes, Canada has taken many positive steps from the introduction of the Muskoka program into the introduction of the 10-year commitment that we currently have. The FAAE, the Feminist International Assistance Policy, has also been a huge policy piece that Canada has been able to very clearly carve out what taking an integrated and feminist approach to international assistance looks like. And I think those investments in that policy framing all have put Canada forward as a significant leader in this sphere. Where I will say we are at risk is that we have stepped forward to say that what our current commitments will do is take that progress further to ensure that it is rights-based and a comprehensive approach to sexual and reproductive health and rights, and we continue to not see the investment in those neglected areas. So I think the proof will be in the pudding in the next 2 years as to whether Canada can scale up investment in those areas to ensure that we can continue to deliver on the ever-progressing leadership that we can be taking in the world.
Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. And for the last 2 minutes, we will go to MP McPherson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say one more time how delighted I am that this has come forward. You know, this motion was tabled over a year ago. The fact that this committee has been relatively frequently filibustered by one member, I think, is indicative of the challenges that we face talking about reproductive rights for women. My question, though, is a little bit following up on my colleague, Mr. Chong's questions. You know, with regards to SDG 5 and the nature of the universality of the SDGs, I also have concerns. You know, there is a good legal framework in Canada, but yet we see consistently lack of access to reproductive health care in this country for Indigenous women, for remote and rural communities, entire provinces, in fact. And I wonder if you could talk just a little bit about, you know, as we look at the VNR, is there work to be done in Canada in terms of access to reproductive health, including abortion?
Yes, of course. And, you know, in Canada in particular, as I noted in other countries, what we continue to see is the people who lack access to these services are in rural and remote areas. They are in lower economic status. They have less resources and means to navigate the healthcare system. One thing that I will say in Canada is in the past 5 years, we have seen a significant increase in abortion access due to the introduction of medication abortion. So this is something that in Canada was federally approved in 2010. 2017. And that transformed our country from having hundreds of abortion care providers to having thousands of them, because you then had primary physicians, nurse practitioners who could dispense this medication that could be used. We're slow. There are many other countries around the world in which the uptake of medication abortion was significantly higher and faster, and it actually remains a crucial component of ensuring service access in other countries globally. So I think there's definitely more that can be done. Right now, Canada has something called the Canada Sexual Health Fund through Health Canada, and it is providing financing to civil society organizations in Canada that are providing service provision and advocacy to improve access issues in Canada. So I hope to see that fund continued or made permanent to address some of these things.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
So that does conclude our questions. Allow me to thank you, Ms. Bowden, for your expertise and your knowledge. And let me also thank Action Canada for all that they do to ensure that you tend to significant challenges we deal with here in Canada. Thank you. Now, members, before we adjourn, as you are aware, a budget was circulated regarding the briefing on the humanitarian crisis in Turkey and Syria. This was sent to everyone yesterday. Can we unanimously... Pardon?
Are we going in camera?
No, we're not.
We're not. Okay.
Sorry, it was the idea was defeated. So is there a unanimous consent for adoption of the budget for the study on Turkey and Syria? Yes? Point of order by Mr. Chong?
Yeah, just a brief one. My colleague, MP Philip Lawrence, indicated that he was asked to appear today on his private member's bill 281 and was disappointed that he couldn't do that today. So I just wanted to convey that to you, Mr. Chair, that he would like the committee to review his bill at some point so it can be reported back to the House earlier rather than later. So I'm just conveying that information to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And we stand adjourned.
Thank you.